Hi, so this is our final project. It's by Austin, Deepak, Justin, and Chester. For this project, we decided to build out a name recognition um, software via Spacey and um, and graph out the relationships in the Game of Thrones book series. For anybody who doesn't know, Game of Thrones is a hugely popular TV series, but it actually is a book series as well. There are currently 5 books that have been published. So what we did was we started off by finding 5 raw forms online of the full texts. We had to clean up those texts in order to be able to process them further in our with our algorithms. So here what we're doing is we're running some regular expressions to get rid of some things that made the text a little hard to understand because we want to sentence tokenize everything because we're going to be doing everything on the sentence level. So uh, we verified also that our books were complete by going to a website that actually tracks the first and last sentences of the books. So that was easy enough. So now we're ready. And what we did was we load in each book into a dictionary. And from here, we can begin the name entity recognition. So this is done via Spacey. And what Spacey does is it's able to look at a sentence and tag the elements of that sentence. It does certain things like it lemmatizes it, it parses it, deletes sentence, it detects sentence boundaries. Um, but essentially, it's recognizing the nouns, the proper nouns, and the names in the sentence, and it's able to keep track of them for us. So that's what we have here. And what we do here is we flatten it to turn it into from a list to create one long list. Um, Here we've done this now for all 5 books, and there was a problem though. What we noticed is that Tyrion is a very popular character on the TV series, but for some reason he actually was not recognized by Spacey's name recognition in the first, the second, and the fourth book. So I mean, this is easy enough to deal with. What we just did was, we added the name Tyrion to these books. Now that he's on that list of characters for the books, hopefully when we run the co-occurrence matrices and the sentence matrices, he'll now be detected later on. Um, so these are just some notes on Game of Thrones. Um, Arya, sometime in book 4, Arya becomes the girl, and you'll notice later on that the girl shows up somewhere in it. When Jon Snow is called John in the book, it's in a positive light. When he's called Snow, it's often in a negative one. Dany is also known as Daenerys, and Ned Stark is also known as Eddard, which you wouldn't really know in the series because they didn't go into that. And pie is hot pie. Um, so what we also need to do was the Spacey recognized a bunch of common names that we wanted to get rid of. So things like places like Winterfell or gods. So we had to create a list of words that we told Spacey get rid of these words, and that's what we're doing here. So from here, we decide that we want to narrow it down a little. So we want to grab the top 25 character names in terms of frequency, and that's all we're doing here. Is we're building out a data frame and a list to capture the top 25 names. Um, and now we're up to results. And as a warning, in terms of if you're going to read through this, I won't necessarily get into it now, but if you're going to read through this, there are major spoilers via this breakdown. Um, but if you look at the first book, Jon and Ned and Tyrion are the top characters in terms of importance. Um, if you notice that actually throughout most of the series, Tyrion and Jon stay at the top. It shows how they're important towards the TV series and towards the book. Um, Certain characters, if you'll notice that in A Feast for Crows, we'll see the word girl starts showing up, and that's where the Arya split is. So Arya is not there at this point. Well, she does show up here, but she's used as girl much more frequently at this point, and even here she's used much more frequently as girl. In the TV show, she's hidden and she's under the reference of girl as in the book. Um, so we have our frequencies, and we could see kind of from the frequencies, um, how important people are towards the book. Obviously, anybody who shows up more often in a book as a character is going to have a larger role in the series. So from here, we want to build on this. We want to say, okay, well, of these characters, what are their relationships with each other like? And in order to do that, what we do is we develop a co-occurrence matrix as well as a sentiment matrix. So the co-occurrence matrix is just going to be a matrix that essentially keeps track of how often these characters have relationships in with each other. And this is done on the sentence level. So anytime two characters are showing up in the same sentence with each other, our co-occurrence matrix is going to track it. And then for the sentiment matrix, um, it goes a little deeper. It says, okay, well, every time these characters show up with each other in a sentence, what is the overall tone of that sentence? So if it's determined that um, via the AFIN function that their score for that sentence is in a positive light, it'll be some sort of positive score. If it's in a negative light, it'll be in a negative score. But being that overall books have different slants to them depending on the authors that are writing the books, what we have to do is we have to first calculate this alignment rate. And the align rate is essentially just a mean overall score that we can use to sort of normalize the scores in the individual relationships. So if a book has a very negative tone in general, we kind of want to account for that in our relationships. We don't want to just assume every relationship is negative, because that could just be the author's tone that is causing that. So in order to kind of get that normalization, what you have here is, I think the alignment rate is built by multiplying by a -2 in the denominator when this numerical value is created. So what we do here is we calculate our matrices. We build our sentiment matrices and we build our co-occurrence matrices. Um, so these are done by, I think the occurrence matrix is the dot product of the occurrence matrix and its transformed self is what our co-occurrence matrix will be. And the dot product of our occurrence matrix and the transformed times the sentiment score is what our sentiment matrix will be. As you can see, the alignment rate here is added into the sentiment matrix because we need to do that adjustment. So from here, we can build out our matrices. And here's an example of just the co-occurrence matrix. And essentially, what you have here is it's saying that, the characters, these two characters in this case, whoever's up here in zero, have met 19 times. And this character have met 12 times. So this is just a count of the amount of times that the characters have met. And what our sentiment matrix will look like if we print it will be some value, some positive value if it was mostly a positive sentiment that the characters expressed, or some negative value if it was a negative sentiment that the characters expressed. So from here we go to plotting the graphs. And this is, I guess, where the fun comes in. So what you can tell is that in this, you can tell that these are the relationships, the co-occurrence from our co-occurrence matrix that's just plotted. So any dark lines are characters that are seeing each other a significant amount of more times, or associated with each other a significant amount more times. And remember, this is on the sentence level. So this means that in sentences, that these characters were mentioned together very frequently when it's dark. When it's lighter, it means that they've obviously had connections, but not as significant. And remember, these are our top 25 characters, so they're all going to probably have some intertwined nature with each other. We tried to plot it out in the spring layout, but it didn't look much better. And I think this circular, while a little confusing, it's easier to decipher where strong connections are. So here, this is book one, right? And here's the sentiment. And the way the sentiment works is that the darker lines are sentiment relationships that are considered negative. So in the case here, we can see that the Lannisters and Catelyn are extremely negative. And anybody who has watched the shows knows that Catelyn Stark, or the Starks in general, and the Lannisters are sworn enemies of each other. So this makes complete sense. To Littlefinger, who's once again, sorry for spoilers, who's a main villain on the show. You can see that he has he's a very dark relationship with Ned. He's actually the one who in season one betrays Ned and pretty much leads to Ned's death. Um, but when the lighter relationships are relationships of that are more positive. So if we look at Sansa to Jamie, it's lighter, and you could assume that as the book series goes on, these relationships change. So that's why we decided to plot them out individually. So in book two, we can see certain other characters are showing more importance, for one, in terms of how often they're frequently showed up. Now Bran and Hodor have a very strong connection. Anybody who's watched a TV show, once again, knows that Hodor and Bran have a very intimate relationship with each other. Um, Pi, who we described before, is one of Arya's good friends, and as you can see, Pi and Arya match up a lot. Jon matches up to Tyrion matches up to several people. And now remember, this is book two, and this is not our sentiment analysis though. So now our sentiment analysis, we can see that the dark relationships are bad relationships, and we could see that Robb and Tyrion have a very bad relationship with each other. In terms of positive relationships, we can see Stannis and Robert have a good relationship with each other. Um, Dany Dany has good relationships with certain characters. Um, and as we move on to book three, Storm of Swords, the strongest here is Jon with Snow, as you can see. Um, Other strong affiliations are Jon and Mance. Sorry, Catelyn and Robb. So Caitlyn to Robb would be, but yeah. So, and we could then look at once again the sentiments. So from here we move on. We can see that the Greyjoys kind of take over in this book. You can see Sansa has a lot of mentions in this book, as does Stark, and Arya to Stark. But I think you get the point. um, but it's interesting because you can see how even by frequency or by these relationships, how these characters, how um, how these relationships were built up on the TV show, and how numerically they show up in via sentiment analysis and co-occurrence matrices. Um, but from here we go to the Dance of Dragons, and you can read Dance of Dragons. So essentially from there we just decided, okay, well, let's look at degree centrality. And for degree centrality, we decided to graph the degree centrality by every book. And you can see that Ned and Stark and Catelyn and Bran show up as the most central to the original book. You can see Robb and Bran and Catelyn are essential to the second book, The Clash of Kings. You can see that in Storm of Swords, Robb, Tyrion, and Catelyn. So you can see Catelyn is showing up as a center, is a very strong degree of centrality character in these books. On the fourth one, you can see Girl, Stark, and Jon. And the fifth, you can see that once again, Girl is taking over. And this is interesting because if you watch the show, the transition of Arya into Girl is a very important part of the show. And she becomes one of the everybody's favorite characters on the show. Everybody roots for Arya on the show, or the girl. Um, so it makes sense that especially she has her own kill list, right? And so she has so many relationships with so many of the characters, and she's so central to it all. Um, but that was our presentation. If you read, we gave a lot more detailed explanation. I didn't want the video to go too long. It's already at 14 minutes. But we hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we want to thank you.